G'day all. It seems that my last union video blew up quite a bit, so today I'm going to be talking about some of the comments that I actually received on that video over the past couple of days, because they brought up a bunch of very interesting points that I'd like to actually bring up in this video. Now the first comment comes from Good Entity 3019. He mentions that you can just export your union as a .obj, re-import it back into the game, and it will just work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it at 000. I don't even know if this is necessary. It's just a good habit to have. 000 orientation 000. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this union. I'm going to export selection. That's the one. You want to export selection, specifically export selection. It won't work if it saves as an RBMX or an RBXM or whatever. That won't work. It has to be a .obj. I'm going to name this Gleba. I've been playing a lot of Factorio lately. And then what we want to do is immediately, without opening any other software, open file. We want to import it. Now there's a way of importing that I discovered after I made my last video. Let me see if I can find it. Import 3D. There you go. It's right there. Open Gleba. And it will give you a bunch of information. I'm going to set it to anchored. That's probably the only thing you want to click here. There we go. It's in. And there you go. Now it will be put into a model. I'm going to ungroup it just so it's not a model anymore. But yeah, I mean, other than the fact that the color has been stripped from it, you do have to copy that over. This is functionally the exact same. Oh, right. Okay, so if the color doesn't come through, that's because you've got a texture ID. So take that off and then set the thing. There we go. Cool. Yeah, so that's how you do it. Now, the reason why you'd want to export your union and then re-import it in this way is that it actually turns the union into a mesh. And the benefit of it being a mesh is that it is no longer saved in the place file itself. It is now saved as a mesh ID, which means it's saved to Roblox's CDN. I've got a comment here from Seat talking about component data, and it reads, component data is very much a real thing. In my game, we frequently keep lots of models as local files for archival purposes, and the models with unions are typically the biggest ones. A model made without unions is typically in the kilobytes range, even if it's triangle dense, because it's all on Roblox's database. But anytime you save something with unions, they regularly clock in at dozens of megabytes each time due to all the data it has to store relating to unions. Now, this is if you were to, for example, save to file, and it saves it as a .rbxm. In those cases, component data is saved with the union in that file. According to another commenter called The End of Time, if your studio file hits 100 megabytes, Roblox will not allow Team Create or game servers to start with your place file. Unions are unusable in large-scale applications for that reason alone, and unions take up so much more space compared to anything else because the data is stored in the place file itself instead of Roblox's CDN servers. So by converting the union into a mesh, you are offloading all that work onto Roblox instead of your computer. This can only ever really come up in really large projects, so it's not super duper necessary, but if you're taking a long time to load into a project, maybe consider uploading a few of your unions and then re-importing them. You might actually manage to decrease the amount of time it takes for you to load into your studio workplace. Now, a little bit of extra context for this circumstance is given by Artem. Component data exists, of course. Studio needs to store in memory just in case you want to reverse or separate the union. It's a feature, so it makes sense. Duh. But in actual live games, not Studio, in actual Roblox, when you're playing the game, that component data shouldn't, and I'm pretty sure isn't, replicated since you can't do the separation at runtime, so it's useless anyway. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, but it does make sense to me, because I don't feel like component data makes sense for it to be something that's tracked in-game anyways. When the union's loaded in-game, component data is not done, but all of the other expensive processes are done as well. So I don't know if converting this into a mesh helps the player at all. I believe that this probably only just helps you, the creator, reduce file size and also be able to load into your game faster. Now, the second way to optimize your union is to actually change how you're using unions. Here's an example of a doorway I have created with a union, and if I negate it or separate it, you can see that it is using a cylinder and a brick to cut a hole in the wall to create a doorway. I would genuinely recommend to never use unions to cut holes and stuff unless there is no way to do it without just using parts. What do I mean by this? Let me recreate this situation, but do so without using as many unions. The first thing that I would do is this is completely unnecessary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this wall, duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D on your keyboard. I'm going to press 3 to change to scale, and I'm going to scale down one of these to match there. In fact, I believe this is all on a 1-stud increment, so let's do that. Right. Then I'm going to Ctrl D again on this side, drag this over, snap that into place. Then I'm going to grab this middle brick, Ctrl D, drag it up, and I'm going to meet that point there. And then the final one, I'm just going to shove my face in here, grab the last brick, pull it down until it is flush with the bottom of the union. I then delete that, and I have cut out half of the process. Now, these are Z fighting. I don't know if you can see that. Let me change color. Epilepsy warning, sorry. I have changed that over. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that these are no longer Z fighting. So we're just going to hold Control to scale both sides of it. That's a nice little trick, by the way. You can do that. Or you can use Alt to scale in all dimensions. But that's much less useful because it introduces some problems. So I'd never really use it. But we have reduced the shape down to these parts. Now we could just grab this and union that. But now this whole wall is a union. And I wouldn't even do that either. What I would do is I would grab this part, shrink it down, shrink that down, then duplicate it, pull this here. I'm going to even go so far as to pull it up and have just literally a sliver of a part here. And then we're going to union that. There we go. Now if I grab this whole thing, it is made up of much more parts, right? And you would argue that that is less performant, but the good thing about this is, let's say I'm building a map where there are, for example, hundreds of these everywhere, in different places, in different positions, different buildings. Some of the buildings have really tall ceilings, for example, and then maybe some of the buildings are really short and squat. You know, the possibilities are endless. You never know, right? In situations like this, by using this union, you have to undo it for every time you want to make a building. Like, let's say I want to make a building with a wall that's wider than this, right? In order for me to widen this wall, I have to separate it, make this wider, then reunion it. As the creator, that's a pretty quick process, but it comes with its issue. If you remember from my video, I brought up that there's this thing called instancing. Every single time I do this and I change it, every single time I change this union, I am creating a new instance of it. And by creating a new instance of it, that's a new thing that the player has to download and a new thing that the player has to then render. And so it is much more performant to have one union duplicated multiple times. The same goes for meshes, but if you're going to stick to using unions, stick to using a standardized basic shape of a union. And again, I gotta bring up the caveat. This is just for big games. If you're making a small project and you're just a small little indie developer and you're just learning, work with... I think the takeaway many people didn't understand from my last video is that you can just use unions. Like, it's allowed. It's fine. It's okay. And in fact, I actually have an article here that I'd like to bring up with you guys. So let me pull that up real quick. Essentially, it seems that they've actually improved the union thing, so I'm going to give a quick little read through of this article. Hello creators, after introducing the robustness and speed improvements to our new inexperienced CSG APIs, blah blah blah, improvements are available, da 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 da. Right, performance. Solid modeling operations within Studio now enjoy the same performance improvements as in Experience. Cold start performance and da 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 da. It seems that based on this little video here, it takes so much quicker to just create unions right off the bat. And that's quite nice. Number 2, robustness. The beta include various stability. You know, I ain't reading all that. I can see right away that that's quite nice. This happened so many times. Oh my god. That's very nice that they have fixed some of the lighting problems when it comes to unions. That's very nice. More optimized meshes. Now this is what I'm excited about. I complained about this a lot in my union video, where you just will create a union and it will just have random tries that appear out of nowhere and you don't understand why that's happening. I quite like this, actually. I have to take a look at this in game in a sec, but let me just read through the rest of this before I continue. A common use case for spheres is to align them with cylinders to create capsules. With this beta enabled, the resulting geometry is a lot more optimized, as you can see in the diagrams below. Yeah, because they would have like duplicate faces. You can see that these are probably like the back faces and stuff, aren't they? That's quite nice. There are two cases where you might notice minor geometric differences: modeling far from the origin, or working with features smaller than 10 to the power of -6 studs. The image below shows a CSG part on the left, and a remodeled version with beta feature enabled on the right. As you can see, the small feature circled in red is gone when the beta feature is enabled. Oh, that's curious. We recommend that if you are modeling very small features, make sure that the object is close to the origin. I brought that up in my video. If you're building far away from the origin, you can introduce floating point inaccuracies. This makes sense. It's always a good habit to build relatively close to the origin, especially if you're in a giant game where like the actual physical play space stretches quite far from the origin. Just change the position to 0, 0, 0, build your thing there, and then drag it out to where you need it to go. Looking ahead, we're continuously enhancing the solid modeling tools in Roblox. One of the most common requests we keep hearing from the community is the ability to perform solid modeling operations like union, subtract, etc. on meshes. Significant progress has already been made on this front, but we are ironing out some issues with texturing. Additionally, we're also hard at work to add plugin support for the recently released Geometry Service APIs. You can have one set of APIs for all your soldering modeling needs, the full feature set. Your feedback remains important to us. Wow, okay, so, negating and unioning meshes? That would be crazy. How would that even work? The fact that they've got that working most of the way. Ooh, that's exciting. Dude, I'm such a nerd. Alright, well, that's made me happy. I've got to look at this in game. Hold up. So here's an example of a union that I have that has obviously got bad topology. It's created a vertex out of nowhere. There's not supposed to be one there. If I duplicate this, drag that over, what we're going to do is we're going to... Now, it did say in the article that... I can't quite understand if the article was saying that these features have already been added. Okay, so it seems like this doesn't happen retroactively. I don't know if that's the case, but I would suggest that if you have a bunch of unions, go into your game, ununion them, and then reunion them. And they might have these better improvements. So let's take a look. If I negate this, and then I union this, yeah. Wow, that is so much better. Oh my god. Yeah, because it doesn't have the floating triangle anymore. It's just, this is the minimum amount of tries to do this. This is clean. If you remember in my last video, I had a union created using a lot of these. Let's see if it affects this edge case. Union. Alright, let's take a look at this. Enable wireframe rendering. Okay, so it seems that you can still introduce extra vertices through bad unioning. So you do still have to be quite smart with how you union. But this, I will say, unlike that last model I made a couple of months back, this is a much cleaner topology already. It just seems that obviously user error can still generate bogus tries that is not required. So, you know, in cases like this goes back to the previous point I was making about doing better topology. Like, this is a prime example of it. Rather than doing that, do something like this. Why did I make that a union? Don't do that. Do something like this, because then your wireframe is going to look like that. And that's much cleaner, right? So, that's pretty nice. But in my mesh video, I complained about the fact that when you union certain things, it just adds, it like changes the shape of cylinders. And in that blog post, it mentions something. So let's separate this. Okay, so that's still the case. I don't know if you can see this very well. Wait, no, it isn't the case. It's fixed. Hold up. It's fixed now. Wait. Oh, that's so... Wait. So whenever you union cylinders in the past, sometimes it would just like completely change the shape of the cylinder. Cylinders are in Roblox specifically. The default cylinder is not made of... It's not like an infinitesimally... It's not a circle. It's like 12... It's a 12-sided shape, basically. Or a 24-sided shape? I think it's 12-sided. And whenever you would union it, the faces would change. You can see there's a point here and a point there. And yet, when I convert these into the new unions, it just follows... Not only does it like follow the... It follows the shape of the original cylinder. That's really nice. I appreciate that. That's been bothering me for literally like 7 years. You know what? This is a great update, okay? This has made it even more viable to use unions than it was before. I know unions are generally a bad habit, but like, at least now, new builders that aren't going to watch this video aren't going to be making super bad unions like they used to, because it would just happen where like you would do some small thing and it would result in like 1,000 extra tries and it would be a mess. So I'm very happy that they did that. I'm actually genuinely quite happy that that's a thing now. That's awesome. That's genuinely really cool. Now, one thing I want to check is if this changes collision at all, if they've improved collision. Fun fact, if you're going to check collision, rather than going to File, Studio Settings, Studio, and then scroll all the way down to Visualization, and then Show Decomposition Geometry, rather than doing... Oh, wow. Yeah, rather than doing that to show it, there's a much quicker way. Just click this little gear in the top right. It should be there. Yeah, it's right there. That's very nice. That's just a quick little boop and it's done. Isn't that beautiful? So if you need a quick shortcut for collision, there it is. Yeah, I don't know. This is the old collision and this is the new collision. It looks the same. Let me try it with this like thing. Let's ununion and let's reunion. Yeah, I don't think they changed collision much. If you want to use good collision, and I got a lot of comments from people saying that like they would make masks of their collision. It would be like me taking this wall, which we know has bad collision, going to can collide false. So make that can collide false. And then taking this one, which has good collision, making this can collide true, but transparent. And then dragging that in there. And like, that is a very annoying way to get around the problem. If you're in studio mode, you're still gonna touch the bad collision. Like, look at where my mouse is. It's nowhere near the sides, and yet it's colliding with the bad mesh. Don't do that, okay? You don't need to do that, all right? If you want good collision, all a person needs to do is set the collision fidelity to precise convex decomposition. Ooh, ow, that's painful. And that will have more accurate collision. I don't know how performant this is, but I got a lot of comments about this. You don't need to worry about it, just use precise convex decomposition. Now, the final and most optimal way of avoiding Blender, but still optimizing your unions, is to just not use unions at all. For example, this doorway is a union, but none of this needs to be a union. You can make this out of parts, right? I made an example of this in my Blender video, but for those of you who didn't watch that, it just essentially, I recreate this out of parts the same way I did that wall over there. Now, obviously, in certain cases, for example, this arch, this just is not a shape you can create in Roblox. You have to use a union or a mesh for this. But in cases where it's like cutting a hole through a wall, but it's all squares, just use parts. Like, it's fine. You don't need to worry about it. You can just use parts for most applications. Now, I do want to talk about another comment I got. I got 2 comments from this about this actually, where people say that they use unions to try and line up textures. Don't do this. Really don't do this. I actually have an example happening right here. I showed this in the Blender video, but again, for those who didn't watch it because it's too long, when you make a part like this, for example, you see how these textures don't line up. With default Roblox parts, it's a bit tricky to line stuff up because there's no way to control the textures up here, right? So one thing that a lot of new creators do is they grab the two parts and they union them. And this is a bad idea because you are creating a completely unnecessary union for no reason. And so what's end up happening is you've got to worry about all of this extra collision. Now, I know they've improved it, but you never know. You gotta check, okay? Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine. Maybe we pull it out and we see this and it's fine. I would assume so because it's a simple union. I mean, there's a lot of extra collision points that don't seem very necessary, but it is ultimately fine. Oh, okay, so it's hollow. What? So people could clip into the wall and hide in here. This happens in Traitor Town a lot, actually. Yeah, so that's actually... No, never mind. That's terrible collision. So what? I have to use hull collision now? So let's go to collision fidelity. Let's use hull, okay? Oh, no, that actually cuts across the corner. Let's use box collision. Oh, that's even worse. So I have to use precise convex. And, you know, that's just not great. So that's the first problem. The second problem is obviously instancing. And you've got to download it, file size, blah, blah, blah. I know it's 2 bricks, but like the principle is there. People do way more complicated, I've seen people do way more complicated stuff. I used to do this all the time, and it's a bad habit to have. So I'm going to give you guys a little tip on how to not do this, okay? Now, the first one is, yeah, you can separate it and it will look like this, but one thing you can do is just rework the parts around a little bit, and they should align naturally. If I take that and I duplicate this brick out, like so, make sure it lines up perfectly, and then I put that there, and then I put it back to where it was, it's the exact same thing, but now it lines up perfectly, and you can't even tell where the seam is. Like, tell me where the seam is in this picture. If you said here, then you would be correct. Okay, so there's no real reason to do it for default parts unless you were working in, for example, I think a great example of this would actually be this wall. So if we grab this wall and use a noisy texture like brick, you can actually see quite noticeably that there are lines. Again, there are ways of dealing with this. For example, the brick texture does favor having stuff like this. So let's say we just do that and then drag this wall over. We have now saved a part, and now we have reduced the seams, and that's great, but obviously you can still see it here happening, and to be honest, there's not a lot you can do about that. And with default textures, I do understand this. However, there is a counterpoint to this, and you're not going to like this, but just don't use a noisy texture. You know, when I used concrete, which is one of the best textures, you can hardly, I mean, you can kind of see it, but I mean, that's a struggle to spot anyways. That looks fine. So if you can avoid using a texture like that, do it. Now, if you end up in a situation where you have two textures that aren't quite lining up like this, and you're using textures, not the default materials, one little thing you can do is you can actually change the offset. So let's maybe do 0.5. Oh, yeah, bam, that fixes it. Nice. Now, I'd like to talk about occlusion culling next. As you can see in this video, this is an example of it working with parts. I brought up in the last video that it doesn't work with terrain. That is no longer the case. If I turn on wireframe rendering and head over behind here like I did last time, oh my god, it's magic. Everything's gone, except for the Roblox character for some reason. Terrain and parts can be used to occlude each other. In fact, I think if I go in this building, most of the terrain will disappear, except for the water for some reason. I don't know why. Actually, is this just true for water? Is water just bad? Oh my god. Yeah, I don't think terrain water gets occluded. Now, I got a question from Untopped Top Hat saying that since you showed that terrain doesn't cause things behind it to de-render, which again has been changed now, Would that mean that making your map out of parts would be significantly more performance friendly than using the built-in Roblox engine? Now, my answer for that is actually yes, it would be. Only because parts tend to be just less triangle dense than terrains to begin with. Like, look at this, right? I am this high above the water. In fact, I am quite high above this water, and it is still rendering at full intensity. And if I get closer, an even wider array of things around me have a higher try count. You can see the borders. Anything that's kind of close to my view model has a higher try count than the further away things. You can see that there's like a high triangle dense section here, then a lower one, then a lower one, then a lower one. Now here's the problem, right? Why isn't this just a giant mesh with a texture on top? Why does it have to be individual triangles? I know that it's a voxel-based system, and for games that actually rely on destruction physics and mining mechanics and stuff like that, you would want this to be the case. But in instances like this, terrain is horrible for performance because, I mean, especially when you have complicated terrain like these hills here, it's a mess. So generally, if you can avoid terrain, I would do it. But again, if you're a new developer, it's just starting out and you're just trying to get pen on paper, words on the page, builds on the studio, just use terrain. It's fine. It's okay. I'm not going to eat you for you. I'm not going to get you. All right. I'm not that malicious of an optimizer. All right. I won't optimize your triangles out of existence if you use terrain or unions in your game. Okay. I really don't care. I'm just letting you guys know. Now, the last comment I want to bring up today is by Elite in Exile. Fun fact, the cells that make up the collisions also affect the shadows of the mesh. The more densely compacted the cells are, or the larger the cell is, the darker the dense location becomes. This isn't even a problem with unions, it's a problem with meshes overall. In general, considering what happens to your mesh during import-export, neither is performant. Roblox is using the cheapest and simplest physics solver for the collision it can, thanks to mobile. I don't know if this depends on what shadow lighting technology you're using, because this shadow looks pretty accurate to me. But I believe if I go to my lighting tab, I do believe I am using realistic, soft. I don't actually know. Is this because they deprecated one of the old lighting styles, and I don't know if this is still the case. Let me check. Let me go to studio settings. Beta features. Let's see. Drag a QOL, haptic effects, UI styling, UI drag detectors. It doesn't look like I've got any lighting based betas enabled right now. So I do genuinely think that this just isn't a case anymore. I don't know. If someone in the comments knows, then please let me know. But that's going to end this video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little bonus. Can I just say thank you guys so much for the insightful comments that you have given. I don't care about the views too much, as I do care about just learning more about this game engine, okay? So if you guys have any more cool bits of information about optimization, performance, how to detect if your game is performant would be a very nice thing. I'd like to make a video subject on that in the future. If I get enough material, I'll try to drop more quick videos like this one, but for the meantime, thank you guys for watching, and if you want to, please check out my Discord. I'm going to be making a channel, if anyone joins, for Roblox Studio builders. So if you guys want advice with your builds, or you want to know, you want a bit of community engagement, please go join the Discord in the link down below. Otherwise, have a nice day.